Yo, 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 yo. Welcome back to another episode of the Nyc Griff Show. Today is Saturday, March 26th. It is 9:11 a.m. Let's jump into this market check here before I introduce somebody you might be seeing here. Looks like we had another good climb here in the markets here in the S&P. I don't know what exact percentage this is, but had another climb in the S&P. The Dow Jones kind of up and down a few times, but looks like it's up a little bit, $153 there. And Bitcoin had a nice little jump here this week as well. Zoom out and see where we're at here on these. Looks like everything is moving up, which again, who knows what this really means. But Griff, what do you think about whenever you see these numbers here? Oh, also for the people that are just listening, the S&P sitting at 45.43, the Dow Jones sitting at 34,861, and Bitcoin sitting at 44,276. So Griff, what's your thought here on this?
I mean, honestly, money isn't very real right now. So, like the fact that these things are closing higher amidst obviously a lot that's going on in the real world, it's not really all that surprising. The VIX going down,
Yep.
I mean, I guess it's pretty predictable. It's pretty high for a while, and Bitcoin made a nice little jump. I mean, I keep seeing from a lot of the on-chain guys it needs to break like 46 or 47 to beat a lot of resistance, but I think outside of the price of Bitcoin, it was a huge week. There were so many things that happened positively for Bitcoin, and if you're really getting going with Bitcoin and investing into it, ExxonMobil mining it is just the first of many big pillars. Russia saying that they're going to accept it for oil payments is just the first, but the fact that it's only at 44,000, I think is got to mean that it's probably one of the only undervalued assets still out there to invest in. I mean, I don't know what you think, Nick, but
Yeah, I mean, you know what the deal is, man. One Bitcoin's one Bitcoin. We know that $1 is not quite $1.
what are the
To
gas prices out there for you?
Odie, do you have any thoughts here on where the markets are at?
Yeah, I think they're looking. I think it's starting to look. We had a little downturn, at the start of the year, at the end of January and February, but I think we're starting to see kind of like a little bit of steady growth this week, which is hopefully there's some good upside. For as we get in here to spring and start summer off here. But like I said, I think I'm excited to see where the market might go next. But I think Bitcoin is without some regulations and stuff is starting to look really good, and it's gonna almost look kind of I would say like almost all the resistance I think they're gonna start kind of circling back, I think, here in the next year, 6 months, I think, and be like, oh crap, this is something possibly viable.
Yeah. Let me take a second here to introduce our third guest to the Nyc Griff Show, Tyler Oedekoven, formerly known as Odie or T.O. I don't know. He's got several several nicknames. Cody Ovens, Covens, Ovens, Coven Oven is one of them. T.O. and Griff and I, we were all teammates at the University of Albany. Griff and I, as you guys may know, were quarterbacks. Odie was a receiver. He's actually a two-time top 10 Sports Center, top 10 plays, whatever that exact thing is called. What is it called, Odie? You know what it
I don't
is.
know. I guess Sports Center top 10.
He's in like he's in like the fraternity of top 10 plays. Especially like in a very specific fraternity of like FC football plays where the video isn't always as good as like the other ones, but his catches were better than everybody else's. So it was like
it great. Odie is also the host of the TO show. Go check him out. We'll plug that here in just a few here where we can find him. We'll do that here in a little bit at the end, but also a host of a podcast himself. Things are moving really well. He's also at this point he's rocking his first spring, not having spring football, and I think he's enjoying the time of slumber. And he is moving. When are you moving to William and Mary?
I'll be there in June, like June 1st-ish. So
you're getting started there this summer then.
Starting there this summer. Excited to kind of get a new chapter, new kind of perspective, I mean, I've been around you guys and kind of got your perspective on different college football, but I haven't necessarily experienced like a different team and a different culture. So I'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah. So
when did you decide that? How long ago did you decide to transfer, and then how long did it take for you to pick a new school?
So I think honestly, like now looking back on it, man, I mean, during the season, I kind of like, I was thinking about it for sure. But when I really actually dove into it, I decided, hey, this is like what's best for me at the end of the day. So, I ended up entering the portal in January, like end of January. And in 2 weeks, I committed to William & Mary. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't want, like, especially with the last semester of undergraduate, I want to make sure I was like, had it figured out before, so I could just focus on school, like focus on training and focus on my podcast and all that stuff. So I didn't have to really worry about like, hey, where am I going to go next? I really just wanted to freaking find a place that wanted me. And,
And so this is your
happy it all
last
worked
year.
out.
This is your last year coming up in the fall.
I have 2 more technically with COVID. So
Oh,
that's why
wow.
I'm able. So it's awesome. I'll be able to get a full MBA while I'm in college for practically free. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to do that.
That's dope. So Griff, I don't know if you've talked with Odie a little bit about what he's doing with his podcast, but pretty interesting what this guy's rocking over there. I mean, got kind of a full team rolling, editing clips, editing videos. You've kind of rebranded the show as well. You've got a new logo, some new branding on your actual video. It's pretty interesting to see you putting together a team. And you had told me about it didn't seem like the goal was necessarily to blow it up and make huge money with it, but you're juiced about getting experience, building a team, managing a team, leading a team. What are your experiences with that so far?
So like I originally started the podcast like almost a year ago, just over a year ago now. And it was kind of just more or less to give like other athletes, a platform to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And I kind of just wanted to give other teams, other players, not necessarily on Albany, but from around the country, like a platform to talk about. But, I in the fall, I kind of got like sidetracked, with football and school. And so I most of my time I was editing the videos like all myself. So like I wanted to be able to, be able to talk about or be able to focus on other things while still having the podcast. So I was like, man, I need to hire some people. And I think along with that, I was like, I want some real life managing experiences. Like you go to school, like you can learn whatever you want to learn about, like, but until you get those real life, like application of it, like I've learned more working, like doing various internships or various jobs more than I have like learned in school actually. So like being able to do it like firsthand, I think is going to help me out, like figuring out, hey, what's my management style and what are these little things? It's not necessarily like on a daily basis. We kind of meet weekly. And I want to give a big quick shout out to all the video editing interns and marketing interns that we have. You guys have been doing a great job. They've been all doing an awesome job. And I'm really excited about, where this will take me. It's more or less not necessarily about getting likes or clicks, but we just want to give other student athletes a platform to be able to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And if the clicks and stuff come along with it, then great.
That's dope, man. I got to ask another question regarding, giving student athletes a place to talk. Griff and I transferred several times. You went through the recruiting process one time coming out of high school. What was it like? Because you were at Albany, 3 years before you're transferring now?
Yeah. So yeah, technically 4.
Technically
now.
4.
Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, coming like the recruiting process, like before Albany, it's terrible. Unfortunately, like, and I don't want to like bash college football, but unfortunately, like it's a business. It's just, it's, you got to understand that it's a business side of things as well. And so, B, being kind of like a skinny kind of, white receiver, it's really tough to get recruited. They're looking for a certain body type or a certain type of player. And so just finding like just finding like a place that really wanted me was really tough. And, like I said, I'm thankful for Albany for actually like believing in me and stuff like that. But the recruiting process is, it either goes one or two ways. You either like a sawed off recruit and it's great, like you get to feel like, hey, you're $1 million during the process, or you kind of just feel like you're just kind of like a side thought. So at the end of the day, it is what it is. It probably won't change, but hopefully with some of these like new rules like of transferring, it's really giving some power to the student athletes when they get to college. But it's also hurting the student athlete because they're not doing a lot of education about like the transfer portal and what does it take to get to another school, or what grades do you need, or some advice from like people who've actually transferred and have been successful doing it.
I think one of the tough parts, and every time that I had transferred, we did not have the transfer portal. And I believe, Griff, did you use the transfer portal whenever you left Albany?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know, like what does using the transfer portal mean? The transfer portal literally does nothing for you.
No.
But yeah, when I transferred, I think I was in that joint. You know what I'm saying? My name was listed. Yeah, it's an interesting process, that's for sure. It's not one that I would recommend to the faint of heart or somebody who's like afraid of rejection. It's odd. Like I've gotten into sales post football, but sales literally is the same as college recruiting. and I mean, literally, like it's the same thing. Like I do medical sales, outside sales, work with a lot of doctors, and I cover a pretty big territory. So like if I were a college coach, same thing. You go to a few high schools or a few JUCOs, maybe there's transfer portal, but it's such a business. You go after your targets, you go after your accounts, quote unquote. And you try to win them. I mean, and now that I look back, hindsight, college football, I mean, yeah, like when you're getting recruited, they're just trying to win you over for you to sign that piece of paper. And then once you get there, I mean, you guys can speak from experience as well. I didn't have too many coaches that attitude they took into recruiting me, they decided to take when I actually got to that school. It almost completely changed every single time. And that's why I wouldn't say I have too many college football coaches that I consider friends to this day. I would almost say if anybody does, I'm kind of questioning you as a college football player. I'm kind of like, I was like, so like, what were you doing there? It's like, you're kind of just pet, you know what I'm saying? Like, well, whatever. I didn't enter the transfer portal though. It's so weird. I'm glad TO over here got an offer pretty quick and got moved on to a new school, because it can be a pretty stressful process, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah. Odie, what was it like? Because it's for me, I transferred, let's see. I transferred from Oklahoma State. I transferred from Southwestern College, and then transferred from NEO, and then finished my last 2 years at Albany. And then cut my Albany career short after 4 years of college football and graduating. And man, those are some tough conversations to have with your current coaches that you're leaving, because depending on the relationship that you had with your coaches, and depending on your status that you were there, whether you were on scholarship or you weren't, you were a part of a team. Those are your coaches. They're supposed to be leading you. They're supposed to be the authorities around. And man, whenever you're a kid growing up, right? I mean, you're not. It doesn't seem like you're supposed to challenge authority on a regular basis. Right now, we can talk about all the moral issues that, like, yeah, there's times where it's like, yo, this is not right. Yeah. But to look at a coach as an authority figure and then say, hey, I know that I made this commitment to the team and to you and to myself for this opportunity here to play, but I'm going to leave. I'm going to cut this short. I'm going to leave, and I'm not going to uphold my end of the bargain. Now, again, we could argue again about coaches upholding their end of the bargain, but What was that conversation like with Albany? Because this is your first time transferring and leaving. What was that conversation like?
So I mean, like, so going into like making the decision, like it was hard because it's like Albany's been like the only place I've like been at, and like, you know, Coach G is like the only one who gave me a scholarship out of high school. So like you feel like, being how I grew up, like you feel some sort of like commitment and like love, like you don't want to like disappoint like your coaches, or like you don't want to disappoint like your teammates. And like being a leader on the team, like it was hard to like come full circle and be like this is what is best for me, you know. But it came to the conclusion, like at the end of the day, like who cares what anybody thinks? You just got to do what's best for you, you know, at the end of the day. And that was at the end of the day, that was the best decision in my opinion. You can say whatever you want to say, but and way I thought, it's not like I made a decision like right away, I'm going to go transfer. Like there was a lot of thought process involved into it. So like having the conversation was not easy, because it's like you feel like you letting them down, but at the end of the day, you got to come to the conclusion of like, hey, this is what's best for me. And as long as you go in to take that approach, like whatever they say, like who cares? Like you're doing what's best for you. As long as you can live with yourself, like being like, yeah, this is what's best for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think whatever they say, like it doesn't really matter. And like, you know, there might be the coach at that point can like say they can burn the bridge, or they can continue to help support you. And unfortunately, I think at a lot of places, you know, they burn that bridge, you know, to where screw you, you know, whatever, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, like whatever. And I also think it's like important to approach like how you take it, like with your coach. Like for me, it was like I let them know in November, hey, that I was going to transfer, and like pretty much saying like, hey, my scholarship's good. Like the first day of the spring, I'm going to transfer then. I'm not going to tell you like, hey, I want to come back, and then be like, oh, well, actually I don't. See you later. You know, like, so there's also like both side of things where I try to take like the best approach to be like, hey, I'm going to try to do this the best way I can possible. And at the end of the day, whatever the coach says, like, you know, you just got to live with whatever he says, but you got to just stick to yourself and stick up for yourself. Because at the end of the day, the coaches it's a dictatorship. You know, the coaches have all the power in the world to, you know, do whatever. But at the end of the day, you also have to take some of that power away and be like, you know, I can do this. You know,
Yo,
you
that's
can't
what I was
stop me
going to
from doing
ask
it.
you. That's what I wanted to ask you, because when me and Nick were there, the transfer portal was still relatively new. Now that it's been around, obviously, for maybe like 4 or 5 years, you have NILs now. Has the power dynamic changed at all? Like, do these coaches treat you more like a free agent as opposed to like cattle, you know? Or
Yeah.
do
So
they,
like, I think there's different
what do they-
approaches. So like for me being
yeah.
a graduate transfer, like and they can see that I'm mature enough to that they treat me like an adult. They actually treat me like an adult. Like so, and also if there was coaches that didn't treat me like an adult, that was just like off-putting. So it's like I really don't want to deal with you if you're not going to treat me like an adult. Like if that's the way you're going to come at me with like how you're going to recruit me. But there's a lot of undergraduate, like freshman, sophomore, you know, even juniors, or even there's even some graduate transfers that like are not mature, and that you're still treating like a high school or kid, like how you're recruiting a high school kid, like look at all this stuff, look at all, you know, like the swag or like whatever it is. But I mean, I wouldn't say that there's like, they would treat you kind of like a free agent a little bit, but like I said, from a standpoint of like the coaches still have the power, like they can just go find whoever they want and replace you, even if you're on a team, like you're on full scholarship, you've done everything in your power, they can still go bring in like whatever graduate transfers that they want and still have them play over you. It's not like it hasn't really changed. It just has given you particular more freedom, but it's also tough because there's so many kids. And like, if you don't have any film, or you don't have a plan to be able to like, hey, here are the schools I want to go to, like I'm going to continue to reach out and pursue, you got to you almost got to be your own promoter. Like you just got to promote the crap out of yourself. You got to be your best marketer. So that's like, at the end of the day, it's like, it hasn't really changed. It's given the student athletes an ability to go where, not necessarily wherever they want, but giving them the power. But at the end of the day, the coach is the one giving them a scholarship. So
Yeah, I would say most athletes are probably still pretty marginalized now.
So it's and like a lot of like even FCS schools FCS guys get screwed because like they're just gonna bring in FBS kids that they think are better, which they're not better. Like I've been in Albany for a while and they brought so many FBS kids in, and I'm like, none of these kids are any better. They're actually worse than like
also
FCS players.
I think something that goes along to that, because when I was at Nevada or even at Albany, transferring, especially as like a receiver or a corner or some other type of position, and quarterback as well, not everybody has the mental endurance to go from one school to another and go, take the coaching and then go to another school and then basically have to like relearn a system, and not really just also relearn a system, but like if you're a guy who works hard, does everything the right way, when you play college football, you are guilty until proven innocent with the coaching staff. I mean, like literally. And then sometimes you're even a really great guy. You do everything the right way and you don't make as many plays in practice as they'd like. And so they still don't like you, even though you are innocent. So it's, for everybody listening, if there's any prospective college football players, I know that's not typically our audience, but it's not really a fair game. And listening to Odie, I don't know about you, Nick, I am so happy to be done with all of that. The real world, like starting a podcast, just working, being into Bitcoin, like kind of getting to decide what to do all the time. And college football taught me a lot of things that now in the real world, I have a huge advantage on other people. Absolutely. I think one of the bigger things is that you have to be in the shit for a while to make a decision like transferring and leaving. You have to like give yourself to the team and then be like, all right, I gave myself to the team. The team didn't give themselves back to me. Probably time for me to go. To have that experience in the real world, because now in the real world, you have to know when to move jobs, or you have to know when to move on from somebody in business, or you have to know when, this is just not the right feeling. And you have to know, the biggest thing is you could ask two smart people the same question and their instincts are going to give you two different answers. So you have to learn to trust your own instincts. And college football does a pretty damn good job of teaching you that if you have any self-worth. If you don't, if you go to college football and then you don't want to play from the rip, then you're just going to suffer for a few years, get your scholarship and dip. But if you want to play and you want to be a dude, you have to start learning a lot of real world things. You just don't know it until you get out of it. So, but it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, I thought about like retiring, like being done, because I was just so fed up with like college football, like. But it kind of is like, man, like there's just some sort of urge, or like you want to just play and like finish it out. Like it was definitely like there was like a thought of like, do I just go be a regular student, like, and just be done like with it, like, that was like a viable actually thought. But it was like, nah, like there's way too many more benefits from like college football, of like, getting a scholarship or like playing in a game or like stuff like that, where all that hard work or all the BS that you like have to deal with, is worth it in the end, in the long term, for 40 years down the road.
When you're in it, you're in it. Then, you don't want to get out of that cycle. Like your mental focus is really good, which will serve you well when you transfer to your new school for sure. I would like to move this probably maybe to like a more financial question. So I would like to know the locker room environment surrounding like cryptocurrency over the last year. Do people talk about it? Are guys like trading their, like, what are they called, scholarship checks? Are they putting it in Dogecoin and like trying to get it to go 10x and like come to the locker room and like flaunt how much money they make? Or is it not really much of
no, it's not really a thought like about it. Like if I kind of really didn't, like, this is like the first year like I've actually like done some certain things, like whether it's the stock market or crypto or like other investment like ideas or like things that I put my like extra, like all whatever is the extra, with the stipend or whatever they want to call it. So I think it's still going to be more materialized, just because, when you're 22, 20, 19 years old or whatever you are in college football, you're not really thinking about like the long-term financial situations. You're thinking about, oh man, I need a new pair of J's, or I need a new watch, or like I'm going to buy a car, or like all these other things, which in the long term, which I kind of got put in perspective of like, man, I want to retire, I want to retire early. Like I want to spend like the rest of I don't want to work the rest of my life. Like I want to find something I love to do, but I don't want to work like till I'm freaking 80 years old. Like my goal is to retire like before 60, and I think that's like a hopefully a possibility. But I think it all starts like starting early. So like, I think that's like kind of important to I think to have some sort of like, especially with this NIL stuff now, where people, and I wouldn't say at the FCS level, people are like making like millions and millions of dollars, because that's just false. But I think there's need to be some sort of like, especially if you're going to get a stipend or these other things, that there probably should be like, you can do whatever you want with your money, but if you want to be smart with your money, like maybe you should start thinking about like other things, like whether it's Bitcoin or, the stock market or other things like to invest in, instead of, like I said, you're spending on material things, or you're just having it in a bank account with like inflation, as we're we're talking about that. So like, I don't think that there's not much at all. And it might be different at Albany. It might be different at other schools, but in Albany, it's not really like a thought process. I don't.
Could you imagine living in Albany with like $1,000 check for the entire semester and gas is like $100 to fill up your, like I would have been screwed, because the FCS level, it's not, you don't get paid as well. Literally, and this is why college football is a business. You literally do not get paid as well. You still get paid, you still get your scholarship, but you don't get a monthly check. You get like a semester check, and the semester check is like, I don't know, tiddly bops, man. Like you ain't getting a lot with it, and I think it's just insane. I don't know if William.
Hey, Odie, kind of question for you, because Griff and I had talked about this regarding college and now kind of where we're at. I'm assuming you've taken your fair share of economics classes. Have you've taken micro and macro?
Yeah.
Have you taken any other economics or finance classes?
Yeah, I've did some like money and banking and
Okay.
stuff like that about, the economy. But I also just like I said, over this past, I would even say like 6 months, I've done some research and some like, I wouldn't say it's like in-depth research to like the point that you guys are, but I've done some like surface researching of like, hey, what can I do to like to help myself, from a financial standpoint of like, I got a couple like side cash of like, hey, I got some money here, like, because it's not costing me the full whatever it is. So like, what can I do with that to actually like make some money or stuff?
So kind of I'm interested to hear your answer on this, because, I think Griff and I talked about this in maybe our first episode and maybe a couple others, but before I had started learning about Bitcoin, and keep in mind, I worked in the traditional financial industry for 16 months before. I'm interested to know what you think is money. Whenever we talk about, because, you're sitting here, you've mentioned the stock market, you've mentioned Bitcoin. We've talked about the umbrella term of crypto. If I ask you what is money, what is your answer?
Yeah, I think of money as like more of an exchange for goods. I'd say purchasing power as well. When we talk about the economic, like, like I said, how much is that? It's at the end of the day, it's trading materials for materials, like however you want to look at it, goods for, practically goods. I mean, you could call, it's a currency, but it's still like a physical piece of thing. Now we're turning it more into like, into digital and stuff like that with like, stocks and stuff like that. So it's like a little different, but I would say like I said, it's just more of like an exchange goods of goods practically.
Do you believe that money is physical? Is that, are you kind of mentioned that it is a physical
I wouldn't
thing.
say it's actually physical. Like it's not like physical, because it's like technically it's not, in my opinion, because money's money. Like, but whatever a dollar's not a dollar, because like, again, you have purchasing power. So like however much you're able to purchase, that $1 with, can vary, and it's been able to vary over time. So, it's not necessarily it's still physical, but your purchasing power is not the same.
So we mentioned inflation a little bit there. Do you know, like, how would you define inflation and what causes it? And I don't know, you may not know that exact answer, but I know that we never talked about that. I mean, Griff and I took our fair share of economics and finance classes in college. And I never once learned about inflation. I don't think.
Inflation is legalized counterfeiting. That's what inflation is.
Yeah,
It is. I mean, think about
it
it.
probably
It
is.
really is legalized counterfeiting. It doesn't matter what view you look at it. Inflation is a marketing ploy that was sold to the public, just like Social Security was, just like the vaccines are. I think, and you don't have to be some right-wing nut to realize that not everybody has the same interests as you. And Odie could speak to this and talk about it a little bit, like inflation or whatever. But your college coaches have no incentive to tell you that you're never going to play if they need you to be a practice squad guy for the next
Correct.
3 years. And they're gonna market it in a way that when you go to the end of the year meeting, oh Odie, you got a chance, like you can do this, or we're gonna do that, or blah blah blah. They get you fired up for another year. Oh, practice squad. And at the end of the day, like, hey, listen, just like minimum wage workers, like everybody in the American economy has a role to do, just like a football team. And in order for America to, at the end of the day, be very strong, you do need a collective buy-in, and you need even the practice squad guys to do really well for everybody to be happy. So I don't know, like that's kind of what inflation to me in college, like I mean, all of these things can be conflated together, because it's like they lie to you. And inflation is a lie from central banks saying like, oh, the economy is growing, oh this, oh that. But your wages, your stipend checks don't get higher semester to semester with inflation. So how in the world can they continue to do this? It's just so weird.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think that to an extent, like I said, when going back to Nick, it's just more, what I've learned on inflation is, and it's very, again, I'm from more of a 30,000 feet perspective here. I'm not in the nitty gritty like you guys are, but like it's just more of like printing of money. So there's more money, so it's worth less. It's like having baseball. I use an analogy of like baseball cards. You go, like, if you guys are into baseball cards, like they print millions of baseball cards of a certain baseball card, and then there's that million out there, so it's worth less. The less and less of it you get, of a, like, let's say you have, where we talk about like the most famous, it's like the Honus Wagner card or whatever, cigarette card. There's like 13 in the world or 14 in the world, whatever it is, of this card, so it's worth a lot more. So it goes hand in hand of like, hey, since there's more money, it's more accessible for people to get. I wouldn't say accessible, but they're printing more money, so there's more of it, so it's devaluing it. And what I get frustrated, like I said, with is like, the government's the one printing the money. I think if they looked at like inflation, wouldn't they be like, hey, let's do some things let's change that. And they might claim that they're doing certain things, but to make the public to be like, oh, we're taking care of it, but they, at the end of the day, like it's frustrating because they're not. It's frustrating and good at the same time, because like the US government continues to make small mistakes, and it won't, at some point it's going to kill us, I think, and I hope that day never comes, but we won't make drastic changes just because of how slow like government moves, because of how many processes that it has to go through, unlike some other countries where they can fluctuate very easily because of how much power certain people have. But I just think it's just kind of frustrating, and it's frustrating, I think, from, I have to listen to a couple of your guys' episodes, like where we come like the housing market or like inflation and like these other things of like, they're really screwing, like the generation before us is really screwed us now. And when you're getting a job and you're trying to find a place to live, like there's no place for you to go live, because guess what? You just started. You don't have necessarily the money to be able to go do that. And there's, again, we talk about supply and demand. Like there is a high demand for, houses, but there's only so many houses out there, that they're going over for listing price, and the market is up because everyone's like, man, I can go, since the demand is so up, I can go sell my house or whatever it is,
I think it's so high too. You can almost feel, I don't know how you feel, Odie, like not studying it as much. Some of these things, like, just to bring it back, the government and what you were just talking about, it's very similar to the fact that when I was at Nevada, I got sold on the fact that they were going to have an indoor facility at some point for me to practice in.
Yeah.
Then I'm transferring and I'm at Albany. Oh, we're going to have an indoor. It's like
new locker room.
Yeah, we're going to have whatever. We're going to cancel student debt. It's like, but like, no, you're not, because at the end of the day, you can't really just bring money out of thin air. It just doesn't work that way. It's just so crazy, like how it just continues to like play itself out.
And what frustrates me is like there's no change. Like we continue to hire or to elect like politicians where we need, like, in my opinion, and I'm not saying government's going to solve everything, because I think like to an extent, like the people can do so much, but when it comes to like currency, like that's US government. So like I think we need some different perspectives of some like different financial people, like where they're not, we're not just in the same rut over and over again. Like we're digging ourselves a deeper grave. Like what I think is good is we need some outside perspective of different people. Now, granted, that's going to be really hard because of, again, with funding, you need you already have to be rich. There's certain criteria you have to be to, be a representative of the US government. But I think as a country as a whole, at least from a financial perspective, I think we need some open free market thinkers in government. And I just think that, like I said, I think we make small mistakes, but over time those mistakes, get us in, shitholes at the end of the day. So like we need some new outside perspective of thinking. Like I think that's where we need to continue to lead down. And like I said, it's like we have these same people, these politicians, salesmen that are selling us these things. And when they're selling us one thing, they're actually doing something complete opposite. If you actually go in and dive into, like, you actually go and read, who's going to go read, a 50, 60 page paper thing that they actually wrote, instead of, I'll just go look at, the news feed and be like, oh, look at the headline and read the first paragraph and be like, oh, they're actually fixing it. And on the surface or below, they're actually not fixing it.
Yeah. Does it make you feel any better that US dollars are backed by the full faith of the US government?
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's so funny, man. I think it's really cool listening to you talk about money. You've already brought up inflation. You brought up absolute scarcity. You brought up basically like trust is a very big thing, but you can't really trust anybody with your money. You can't trust a central authority with your money. So I guess I would bring this right into, so like, what do you know about Bitcoin? Like, do you know a lot about it? Do you like,
I don't do like,
what do you think Bitcoin is, kind of
thing? So Griff, my perspective on Bitcoin is, I look at it as not necessarily a currency. I look at it as more of practically another stock that is almost that is not regulated necessarily. So it's more of a free market, and that's kind of my basic view of, in my opinion of it. And I understand that there's
hold on, Odie, before you get too far into the weeds here and get yourself in a hole, stock of what?
Huh?
Is stock the correct word that you want to use?
I don't know if stock is necessarily the correct word. It's hard because it's like an anomaly, in my opinion, because
Agreed.
It's not.
It is a phenomenon, 100%.
It's not like,
they don't teach the history of money, Nick, in college. It's crazy. Like, unless you have somebody.
It really is wild. So Odie, it's interesting to look back. If you ought to go check out the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. Really has a rich history of money in that. And okay. Dude, it's wild to look at so many civilizations before us and nations before us. Rome, Native American. There's a great story of these Yap Islands where they used rye stones as money at one point. And And also too, to clarify, Griff and I's thoughts on what money is. Money is not a thing or a tangible good. It's money is supposed to represent economic value that was created. And that economic value that is created through expending our time and our labor into creating some good or service in the economy, whether you're an employer or an employee. Because before we had money, we operated on a barter standard, right? A barter system where you create and produce apples and I produce oranges. But the inherent and that works great if the two parties, or however many parties are involved in the transaction, want to trade what the other is producing, right? Or is giving as a service. The inherent issue with that is the scalability, because what happens if you produce bananas and I produce oranges, and I want your bananas, but you don't want my oranges? So then what do we do, right? And that's where money comes in as a medium of exchange. And so it's interesting to look back on several examples in history where we find ourselves right where we're at right now, where we had some supply of money, and whoever the producers were of that money produced more, because whoever produces the money, they are the ones that stand to benefit the most, and the holders of that money stand to lose the most. As you mentioned earlier, right? If I hold $1,000, and then the federal government decides that they're going to print $1 trillion more dollars, well, then my $1,000 just now immediately became less of the whole. It lost its buying power, right? It lost its value. And that's absurd, man.
Do it, T.O. I'm telling you, I think we have to have T.O. back on in like a month, and we need to give him like a good amount of material, or maybe just like a few videos to watch about Bitcoin, and kind of give him maybe a good idea, because I was going to say he sounds like the easiest orange pill I've ever had. Like, because his mind, you're very open-minded, T.O. You're very smart, you're open-minded, you're going to get your MBA, and I think you really, really should look into Bitcoin quite hard, because I've actually had quite a few friends go get their MBAs, and quite honestly just think they're way, excuse my language, podcast, way fucking smarter than they actually are. Because people take education nowadays, and they take degrees, and they take these things that do not matter in the real world, because I can promise you, in a business deal, it's going to matter about the type of person you are and how much you know about what you're bringing to the table. So it'd be cool for you to understand Bitcoin a little bit, because I can promise you, my economics degree is such an interesting story. I started learning about Bitcoin when I was door dashing in Albany. Me and Tio had a class together my last semester at Albany, like Excel class that was such a waste of freaking time. But I had to get it to graduate. It was like one of my 9 classes in my last semester. And man, Tio, I'm telling you, the moment I started like listening to Bitcoin was a pretty large reason why I didn't want to continue to play college football after Albany. It was a pretty big reason why I wanted to get into the workforce, because I was like, this is a really asymmetrical opportunity for young people like us. And it really will only be as lucrative for a little period of time. And on top of that, Bitcoin changed the way I viewed the world, the way I viewed business, the way that I view economics, the way that I view government, the way that I view people. It's an insanely very encompassing, I wouldn't say it's a very encompassing technology. And really the biggest premise, you talked to earlier, he was talking about transacting with each other, right? Like you were saying, transacting services and goods and things like that, which I thought was really unique, because you wouldn't have somebody who doesn't know Bitcoin talk about money in that way. So I thought that was why I was like, this is going to be so easy for this guy. Bitcoin is the first time in human history there is a way to transact your economic value with nobody in between. And it's the most secure, absolutely scarce form of that money the world has ever seen. But that's really the big deal here, T.O.
That's why I enjoy it, Griff. So
value, and we don't need a government, we don't need a bank, we don't need literally anything. It's an open, permissionless network, and that is the real technological revolution that it is a big part of what Bitcoin is the fact that we can transact our value now with nothing in between us.
So like I was like kind of like 6 months ago when I actually started like investing and doing different things like with my money, I was like I've heard all these things about Bitcoin, but I was scared because I'm like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But as I learned a little bit more and more, I was like, man, this is like has some of my morals or stuff that I believe in.
Yeah.
Because it's like free market. Like I'm a big
Love that
person that believes in free market. And I like like I said, I haven't done any like necessarily research, like in-depth research as you guys have done, like to do it. But like I said, my view is like I can't explain necessarily what it is, but it's like it's knowing that hey, it's a free market. And that's what like incentivizes me. And like I'm continuing to buy like honestly like more and more Bitcoin because of like the value, knowing the value of it being open and free, and like there's no like government involved, and at the end of the day, like government can do some good things, but I think a lot of the time like governments do some pretty screwed up things, like, and that don't necessarily help the people. So that was one of the reasons why, first initial reasons, and one of my main reasons where I'm like, man, this could be something really cool if it can stay like this.
What's interesting, we talk about Bitcoin and money and economics as this like financial monetary good, right? This financial thing. It's about money, but and Griff will go off on long tangents about how much more money really impacts. It's interesting to look back again. I'll refer back to the Bitcoin standard again. And there's several other podcasts and articles and things that you can read about it, but and I think we're going to do an episode about it here in a couple of weeks. But time preference and money and how much that really affects civilization and the people and the culture, dude, it's crazy. Like whenever you think about the Great Renaissance period, the Industrial Revolution, any huge times in human history, the Great Roman Empire, whenever it was building and building and building up to its peak, right? All of these things happened in times of sound money. And those things happened in times of sound money because people had certainty looking into the future, right? And they had to talk about time preference. They had low time preference, meaning they could forego things today for something in the future, right? And right now, where we're sitting with inflation the way it is, with money, the money supply in the control of the government, people are now forced into a position of having a high time preference, meaning they've got to spend it as much as they can now and today because it is being eroded over time by inflation, right? As the money supply increases, I think since 1913, the cumulative inflation percentage number is like 2,300%. That is absurd, right? And so what does that do? What does that cause? That causes us to no longer prioritize saving, because if you took $1,000 and you put it in your bank account today in a checking account or even a savings account,
it's over.
That money is not going to be it's not, $1,000 will still be $1,000, but $1,000 in 5 or 10 years will not have the same buying power.
Correct.
In 5 or 10 years, right? And so the interesting part, right, to think about is with Bitcoin being an absolute scarce monetary good. I don't know if you know this or not, Odie, but there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in supply. And what that does,
I did not know that,
is it allows people to know that, hey, if I save my economic value in Bitcoin, that amount of Bitcoin that I hold today will be the same portion of the whole anytime in the future. Yep. And what does that allow us to do, right? When we talk about culture and civilization and people, real life, right? It allows us to save more for the future. It allows us to think more into the future. It allows us to think about our kids and our grandkids. We talked about this a little bit a couple episodes ago about, I think it's either our generation or maybe one generation ahead of us that has said that they're the first generation in history, in American history, I believe, to say, we don't think the future is going to be better than what we've got. We think it's going to be worse. And that is not good, because then that inherently pushes people to a short mindset, a short time frame that they're looking at, and it doesn't allow for innovation into the future because we are uncertain about the future, right? Bitcoin is huge in that, where you know, and it's tough because right now Bitcoin is just treated as a speculative risk asset, right, by the vast majority of people, and I think that is for several reasons. A couple of the main ones, or one of the main ones being the infrastructure isn't quite there yet to pull out your phone and use your you know, Apple Pay, or you know, any other service really, and go buy your gas, buy your groceries, buy, you know, and you can do that in some parts of the country, and there's several third-party services you can use to use your Bitcoin to buy things online. But at this point, the infrastructure is not there to use it as a medium of exchange, like you were talking about, Odie.
Yeah.
And it's wild. But yeah, I do agree though. Bitcoin does hold a lot of the core principles in itself that I hold within myself, and the things that I believe, similar to yourself there.
Just to take it to just one step further from what Nick was going to, because I was hoping Nick was going to say this too. When you think about everything Nick just said as well, your money is just a representation of your time. Time is actually money. I think that's one of the biggest things when you start looking into Bitcoin, is you realize money is time. I know it's like a saying in like SpongeBob SquarePants or whatever, like time is money, Mr. Krabs, whatever, the whole thing. But time is literally money. And humans go around, all we do is transact our time with each other. And so under that school of thought, inflation, taxes, all of this stuff, they're stealing your time from you. And think about that for somebody who lives in the inner city, or somebody who grows up in a middle income family. If you're devaluing their time
Oof.
just by inflating it, well, the thing is that, you know, somebody who's unskilled, somebody who doesn't make a lot of money, somebody who has to do a by the hour job, they can only make so much money with their time. So they can only go get so much with it. So if you're devaluing what the money is, you're essentially devaluing everybody's time. And that's kind of the big thing people are missing about this whole upcoming inflation recession, is that, yeah, they could theoretically just print money all the doodah day long, but you're marginalizing a large group of people, especially people without assets that can protect themselves in times of inflation. Because if you don't have a house right now, your time is essentially not worth shit. Because I mean, I make a lot of money and it doesn't really matter all that much. I don't have a house that's increasing with inflation. So I'm not really winning as much as it would be I should, when it comes to, okay, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, or one Satoshi is one Satoshi. Okay, so like if you made money in 1985, theoretically, your money should have more value, not less value 25 years later. And if you hold your money in a savings account in America, oh my goodness, give $10,000 to a bank. They're going to go lend it out within 10 minutes. You're going to go back there. They're going to be like, well, we can give you about 30% of your money back. And you're going to be like, why can't I have all my money? Because banks lend it out for a 15% return and give you 0.5% in your savings account, while inflation's at 7.5. So it's time theft. And if you think about it even further, 30-year mortgages for people who really can't afford them, you're borrowing 30 years of time to get that home now. And these homes are so over, I mean,
Oh, it's
they're
crazy.
so overvalued. And you know, that's great for people who own homes, but think about this too. It's a bunch of bag holders, people who are buying these homes right now, because in 5 to 10 years, if this market doesn't continue to go up, they can't refinance to restructure their mortgage. They can't make that $450,000 payment on that home because their home's worth 250, and now they can't even sell out of it. So just to, I mean, Nick said so many great things, but when you're getting into Bitcoin, or when you're thinking about money, I just hope more people realize it is literally your time they're stealing from you. It's not just you know, a couple dollars here and there. It's literally your time. And I think we all agree on this. Time's the most precious thing we have, only for one simple fact: you can't get it back until
Right.
they invent a time machine. So that's why Bitcoin is the only absolutely scarce monetary asset on this planet, but time is the only scarce, truly, absolutely scarce thing in this world. You cannot get time back. So you cannot get that economic value back, especially if they're just cutting you out from underneath. It's like, it's crazy, man. And they don't teach kids in college that, because most of those kids borrowed 20 years worth of time to just drink on a Saturday night. And now they're going to go slave away for the rest of their lives, because you want to know what? Not everybody is Elon Musk, or not everybody's even their time's not worth that much. I mean, you go to a free marketplace, Odie, if you're not skilled, or you don't bring something to the table, or at the end of the day, if you're a rich person and it wasn't just spoon fed to you, you earned it in some way. Your time was very valuable. So not everybody's time can be that valuable. And if we don't increase the strength of our money, if we don't increase that buying power you were talking about earlier with our money, and we just let every marginalized person in this country's time just get freaking cut out with 7.9 fake percent inflation, God knows what it actually is, where are we going to be in 20 years? Dude, we're going to be screwed. And it brings me to my point. Boomers are selfish. Glad I got to say that on the podcast today. They're selfish, man. They don't care about us. They're all the ones that are elected right now. Social Security, Medicare, they're pretty much done. I mean, we're like in a bad way economically, because we voted the same people into power, and they've played the same game for so long. And the US dollar being backed by the full faith of the US government is like, dude, I'd rather have monopoly money. Honestly, that's why I buy Bitcoin. I'd rather have monopoly money than US dollars. I mean, I just don't feel like they care about us. So sorry, I do have to go on a tangent, Nick. That's why we have the podcast. Like, that's why we're here. I mean, it's crazy what they're doing right now, and they don't tell MBA students this. They don't tell kids in college this. I took economics. Me and Nick were in the same classes. We're in your money and banking class. Money and banking 350. We learned about too big.
We
to
all
fail.
took that class.
Too big to fail is the biggest joke played onto the American public ever. All of those companies, theoretically, 2008 should have been a crash twice the size of what it even was, if we're really talking about where money should be right now. And if you look at those charts that Nick was showing, the NASDAQ, the S&P, the housing market, a lot of commodities, a lot of assets, if you look at how inflated everything is right now, because they're literally just stealing people's time, who knows where we're going to go. That's why I implore you to buy one of those Bitcoin, because in 10, 20, 30 years, there's only 21 million of them. There's only 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis. So there's only enough for everybody in the world to have about 300,000 Satoshis. And if you truly believe in sound money, everything will get cheaper once we start adopting Bitcoin. So what you need to watch with Bitcoin is much less what the buying power of it is in US dollar, much more of what the buying power of it is just in real life. And you're going to see pretty shortly, like one Bitcoin, it can probably buy like $45,000, can buy a lot of stuff. One Bitcoin, there's only 21 million. There's 56 millionaires. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. If you have a whole Bitcoin, dude, that thing's gonna be able to buy a country in probably in like 100 years. In 10 years, it's gonna be able to buy you a house. In 20 years, it's gonna be able to buy you a neighborhood. If you have a whole Bitcoin, I mean, that's how scarce and absolutely important it is. But all right, I'm done on my tangent.
Odie, you have any thoughts there on that? That was kind of a long couple of pieces there.
Yeah,
from the
I'd
two
agree.
Of us.
I think that's very viable, especially that there's a cap on Bitcoin, which makes it, again, you're not like the US dollar where you're printing money over time, and you can dictate how much money you can print in a certain year or a certain time to be able to make the currency, worth more or less.
We're gonna have him orange pilled in a month, Nick.
So
100%.
So I think that, like I said, I think the future is bright for people who are outside thinkers, and who have open minds. That's one thing, like I said, when it comes to all this, is like you have to come in, even if you've had years of knowledge and experience. I think it's important to figure out and continue to have an open mind and be like, I wouldn't say, like I said, I wouldn't go to the extent of where Griff is at, because that's where I'm at right now, of like, hey, I still believe in it, not to like probably the extent that Griff does, but like I think I can come around to it if I read and believe what I see, from different research. But again, I haven't done the research, so I can't necessarily I have just like a very small percentage of what it actually is.
A lot of people feel like Michael Saylor always says he feels like 100 hours is the amount. If you put 100 hours into Bitcoin, he said and I believe this too. You put about 100 hours and you think, I don't know, 100 hours is a good chunk of time, Nick. What do you think that is? Like a few months worth of like hard studying, like actually like watching a lot of videos and reading a lot of stuff, or maybe reading a few books. I don't know. But once you get to that amount of time, and if you're pretty open-minded and you understand economic concepts pretty well, like if you have a pretty good business mind, even like if it's not Bitcoiny, there are very few people who spend that much time learning about Bitcoin that are like not as passionate as Nick and I are to start a podcast. Because once you get to a certain reading level of it, just like I'm sure if you got to a certain reading level of any industry, I mean, you know how much you know about college football, T.O., to the outside world. I mean, you've spent thousands of hours, you know what I'm saying? So you take that amount of time you put into a sport and you put it into, a different skill or a different tool set. And if the tool set is Bitcoin, like me and Nick over here studying this pretty religiously for a while, you realize like I would have jumped ship a while ago, just like I would have transferred schools. If Bitcoin wasn't what everybody said it was, I'd have jumped ship a while ago because I've read about it. I've read the white paper. I've read books. I've read more Twitter threads than I care to admit. I've watched more YouTube videos and listened to more podcasts. My most listened to thing on Spotify was the Pomp Show last year because I'm listening to episodes like 3 times over. But you spend the time, and Nick and I will definitely, now that you've been on here, because this is going to be a whole thing. Part 1, we'll talk
definitely
about
going to have to come back on and have some more discussions.
Part
have
2,
some different some discussions.
Like Will Clemente, he's going to be like a Bitcoin on-chain analyst in a month because he's going to have such a great. You're going to have the best thing about Bitcoin is everybody who gets into it has their own perspective, and you're going to have a really cool, fresh perspective. Yeah, I love talking to Nick about it because I was in it well before Nick was, but man, like he has so many cool perspectives now that he's like getting into it because it's a free market. I mean, if you really get down to the nitty gritty on Bitcoin and the internet, dude, we're creating like manifest destiny. We're creating a new West Coast. We're creating a new world, and it is in Bitcoin. It is in the internet. And if people don't start learning it, you are going to get left behind in some of these things. I mean, it's just what it is.
Well, Odie, we absolutely appreciate you hopping on with us today. I've got your YouTube and your Instagram pulled up. Where else can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, we're on all, like I said, so YouTube, we post clips, we post the podcast. Usually a lot of people enjoy that on there. We also can find us on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're on anywhere, all Spotify. We're on anywhere you get your podcast at, honestly. Thank you guys for coming on here and really talk it. And like I said, I always like to come in to new things with an open mind. And, I think something like your friends and your surroundings can like kind of give you like, can point you in the right direction, but also can like opinionate you a little bit. I like to just kind of throw that away and, believe it for yourself. They might have an opinion and it might be true, actually true. But, having that open mind and stuff like that, I think it's important, and not necessarily in Bitcoin, but in any life aspect you do, whether it's a new job or a new place or anything like that, just go in with an open mind. And, I think what you guys are doing here is great. We'll give you thanks for having me on, and I appreciate you guys, continuing to inform me and about new things that I just love learning new things constantly, whether it's
I think
or anything.
I think what you hit on there is super important. That is really the goal, is to, hey, we hope that we can influence some people to check out Bitcoin. For sure, you have to learn it all for yourself. You have to. You can't borrow opinions. But hey, we appreciate you coming on, Odie. Come hit us on Twitter. The DMs are open. We like to be active and talk with people on here. Shoot us some DMs. We'd love to have more guests on. We do now have video on Spotify, but if you are not watching there, you can come watch on our YouTube channel. It is the Nyc and Griff Show. Twitter is at Nyc and Griff Show. Come check us out. We appreciate you guys listening to, what is this, the 14th episode, Griff? I think this is episode number 14.
Pumping these out.
We just do it once a week.
You guys are awesome.
Consistency is the big thing.
Hey, I love it. You guys are, like I said, you guys will see, I bet you guys will see growth here over the summer if you guys keep doing it. you just got to get to so many, man. I bet you guys you'll see some growth. So I'm really excited to continue to follow you guys.
Yeah, buddy. All right, Odie, we will see you next time. Everybody, peace, and we'll see you in the next
Peace.
episode.